Hello, my name is Connor Joyce, and today I'm going to be presenting to you Applied Behavioral Science 101. I myself am an applied behavioral scientist of many years, and I write frequently about the field. So if you'd like this content and you want to read or listen to more, you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, where I'm at Connect Connor, or by email at connectconnor@gmail.com. But let's jump into the content. Applied behavioral science, at its core, is bridging the intentions to actions gap. It's the recognition that knowledge about wanting or knowing that one should do something is not enough to actually create behavioral change. Instead, applied behavioral science is the tool to bridge that gap and help someone get to actually fulfilling their desires and taking action. So when we talk about applied behavioral science, we have to recognize that behavioral science as a field is huge. It is pretty much all of social sciences mixed with a couple of other fields. So it's gigantic. And so for today's subject, I'm going to distill it into four primary components, which is the basis of applied behavioral science. The first is biases and heuristics. You've heard this with System 1 and System 2 if you've ever run across Daniel Kahneman's work. We're going to talk about habit formation, things like the habit loop and tiny habits. We're going to talk about choice architecture, nudge, which is many people's first entry point into the field. And then lastly, we're going to talk about social norms, which is the newest field that's being applied in this applied behavioral science setting, but is highly relevant. And I think where a lot of the future of applied behavioral science will lie. So let's start with biases and heuristics. Now, many of you have probably come across the writings of System 1 and System 2. But if you haven't, the primary philosophy behind this, and this is work that was done in Thinking Fast and, or was most popular by Thinking Fast and Slow, and was work done by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. System 1 is the primordial animalistic part of your brain that immediately responds to stimuli. This is where you have unconscious, fast thinking. It's when you're on autopilot. And we live a lot of our lives in this System 1, which I'll describe a little bit more why in a second. Now, this compares to System 2, which it is more slow. It's logical, it's rational. But the reason it's like that, or the reason it takes time, is so that you can go through options and really be able to determine what is the right decision. Now, in a perfect economical world that the field of economics for so long held true, an individual would live their mind in Systems 2. They would be logical. They'd think through every option. But the problem is that System 2 takes a lot of effort. And therefore, we actually live in a world of bounded rationality. I love this graphic. It really shows it. In this unbounded rational world, we would be doing all the calculations. We'd see a berry jam and we'd see a mint jam, and we would be running different utility equations and trying to determine how much we really want each jam and what utility it will bring to us. But in reality, we live in a bounded rational world. Our mind can only spend its energy on so many things. And so we look at that berry jam and we go, that sounds good right now. And we jump right on it. It's that fast automatic response where we live a lot of our lives. Just to really hit this home, think of the equation 2 + 2. Immediately 4 comes in your mind. That's System 1. Now think of 22 times 13. That's a little bit harder to have come to your mind. You're actually going to have to use System 2. You're going to maybe have to pull out a pen and piece of paper or start to do 20 times 10, 22 times 13, however you approach it. That's System 2. Now, System 1 is quick, but then in trade, it means that's where the biases live. And so this great graphic here really encapsulates all of the different types of biases that people have reported or that various academic studies have identified. To just call out a couple from this giant table, One is loss aversion. And this is another work that was done by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, which shows that people feel the pain of losses more than what the equivalent gain would bring happiness. So if you were to be given a 50-50 coin flip, $100 if you get heads, lose $100 if you get tails, many people won't take that because they recognize that the loss is going to hurt more than the potential gain. The peak end effect. This one I love to talk about when it comes to vacations, because peak end effect means while we may think that our memories are constructs, an average construct of the whole experience, in reality, it's generally whatever the highest or lowest moment was during that experience and how it concluded. So in a vacation, instead of making that 5 days, every day be the best day possible, you may be able to get away with just having one outstanding day and making sure it concludes on a good note. The IKEA effect comes from the company IKEA, and it's the fact that we take endowment in things that we build. Furniture that we ourselves construct is generally more loved than furniture we get delivered. I know I love this desk, and I know I built it. Confirmation bias is another one. That is something that we see in the news frequently or in our politics, where one seeks out information that confirms their beliefs while also ignoring information that does not confirm their beliefs. This one can be very dangerous because it allows us to get into thought bubbles where we're only accepting information that continues to fulfill what we believe is correct. And now the last one is the Dunning-Kruger effect. This one, whenever you start a new job or get into a new field, this is a classic effect that shows very quickly people become confident. They go, oh, I understand this stuff. This is great. This is so easy. But then as time goes on and one actually begins to scratch the surface of whatever field or work that they're beginning to do, there's actually a big plummet that happens. And you realize there's so much out there for me to learn to really be an expert. And then there is a slow climb back up to an actual level of confidence that can be backed by some knowledge. This was just 5 examples of biases. You can see this chart, and Wikipedia has some other ones. There's many charts out there that show there's countless biases that exist in the world. Now, shifting over, make it a little bit more practical. I know I love my Apple Watch. Many of you are probably wearing an Apple Watch, and I think it's one of the best examples of a system one at play, system one design at play. Apple took what is actually relatively confusing and difficult to understand setup of how many calories am I burning? How does that equate into proper exercise? When I'm standing, am I standing enough? What does it mean to stand enough? There's some complexity around these behavioral metrics that are connected to a fitness life, and Apple distilled them into 3 rings. And what is that? It's simplification, taking complex metrics and moving them into 3 main categories: move, exercise, and stand. It is the design of closure, which we as humans love to see that closure. And so now we have the extra incentive on top of wanting to get outside and wanting to fulfill those desires. Now we want to take some action to fulfill our rings or close those rings. Another example, this one of loss aversion, is a Peloton return to the leaderboard. Peloton blew up in popularity because of their gamification elements. And here you can see an email that says, I miss seeing you on the leaderboard. And this is coming from a coach from Peloton. So it's, hey, you're losing, you are going to feel the pain of being off that leaderboard if you don't jump back on, or we're going to all continue to feel the pain if you don't jump back on the Peloton. Similarly, Google does a great job with loss aversion by saying you've been on a streak, and streaks are another gamification element that really hones in on both ownership, this is my streak, and loss aversion. It's going to hurt to lose the streak. And so Google told me, you're on a 2-week streak. Keep putting reviews, keep on this streak, and you're gonna feel great, is pretty much the implied message. So here's a couple examples of loss aversion. We're gonna shift to the second component now, choice architecture. Now, many of you have probably entered this field hearing about nudge. Nudge is by far now the most popular behavioral science concept. Many people equate behavioral science to nudge in itself, which as you'll see through this presentation, it's actually a much bigger field, but people love to clamor onto one tagline, and nudge has become that for the field, and for good reason. It encapsulates a lot. But at its core, what Richard Thaler, who and then Cass Sunstein was the other author who initially wrote the book Nudge, and both of them have continued to talk about what nudge is because we have these biases, and because we live in that system one, the architecture of the choice environment matters a lot. It is the core setup of a decision that is going to persuade someone to go one direction or another. It's where that bias can come into play when constructing that environment. So the environment really matters, of that choice environment specifically. So the classic example that you probably have heard of now is a default nudge. Now, what is a default nudge? That is when you create a opt-out of one choice instead of an opt-in of any choice. You're choosing a choice for an individual. And in the organ donation example, there was a collection of countries that they had done surveys that showed people wanted to be organ donors, but yet they didn't have, even though it was 80, 90% organ donors, only 20, 30%, or I can't remember the specific numbers, but we'll run with those for this presentation. Now, the default was, I'm at a DMV. I'm trying to get out of the DMV. And this is, I should say, this is where we signed up for the organ donation, is at the DMV. I go in. I want to get out because it's the DMV. You ask me any questions, I'm just going to say no if I don't have to, so I can get out of there. One of those questions was organ donation. And so because of that, because of the choice environment where someone was being asked to be an organ donor, they ultimately were saying, no, I don't want to, just get me out of this DMV. So what these original authors did was they flipped the script. They said, as part of those questions, we're going to opt you in as an organ donor. All you have to say is you don't want to be now. And lo and behold, organ donation rates skyrocketed. Simple switch from opt-in to being an organ donor to opt-out. Simple default switch made a huge effect. Now, not every nudge is going to have this seismic of an effect, but there are some low-hanging fruit like defaults, like choice architecture, or I should say choice overload, which is another one with 401ks. There's a Vanguard study that you all can look at that show these simple nudges can have huge impacts. And the thing is nudges are everywhere. I love this graph on the side because you can see some simple nudges here. Defaults we talked about, placement, depending on where you place stuff, there's great examples of the things that are at eye level on a store shelf generally are going to be the most purchased. And that is the same for kids cereal. That's generally placed at kids' eye levels. And that's where the hotspot is because they're aiming to place the product at your eye level so you look directly at it. Availability, contrasts, different prompts, these are all different types of defaults that can be leveraged. So let's look at some examples. Now, another default is Acorns, which Acorns has built themselves a full app and great banking experience by having people set a default that their money will automatically round up, and that roundup money will be put into a savings. The default is, once I set this, my money will be being put, my extra money will be being put into savings right away. And again, Acorns has built a powerful app and full product experience around this simple idea of let's help people save by enrolling them in defaults, by enrolling them in savings by default. Now, nudges are great, but they also can quickly slip into dark patterns or unethical nudging. And we're seeing that more and more. If you've ever been on a website for a travel website that tells you every hotel is about to be sold out, or something along those lines, you've encountered a dark pattern. It's false scarcity. Some other examples of poor default of poor nudges that ultimately turn into dark patterns is this Barclays default one, where you read that and it says, choose how you want us to send marketing messages. You're like, oh, perfect, that makes sense. I'm not going to click any of them because I don't really want to hear from Barclays. Or maybe you'll click text message because you're like, oh, I would just want to hear a text message. That's all I want. But if you read that box or that line above the boxes, it says ticks the box if you don't want us to tell you about the offers. So if you actually don't want to hear from Barclays, you need to click all those boxes. Now that is a dark pattern. Similarly, you can see Beyond Menu sent me an email saying your Friday reservation is confirmed. So obviously I'm going to click and go, I didn't make a Friday reservation. And then when you click it, it actually tells you it's just a marketing email, but they're trying to make you click that email because you're thinking you forgot something. Software as a service products or B2B products, they also create dark patterns. And you can see some, this was from a SaaS product that is just making a setup here where there's so much information on the page that you just want to try to get into whatever you're trying to do. You want to start without business class, which is what the product flow that the individual was going on in this screenshot. But if you see all of that is there, your eye goes right to that button that says start 30-day free trial. And that's going to put you into a whole setup where now you're going to be being billed after you finish that trial, etc. When really, if you wanted to just continue with the free experience, you want to actually go down to start without business class, which is all the way at the bottom. So placement is a big one of a dark pattern there. So that was choice architecture. Now we're going to start to talk about habit formation, and we're going to do it through two frameworks. The first one is James Clear's habit loop. And it has 4 primary components to it. Cue, I'm triggered. I'm recognized what's going on. Craving, now I want something. Now that I've been cued, I want something. Where is it? Oh, response. Now I'm going to go do it. And then reward is I did that action. Now I'm satisfied for some reason. I fulfilled that craving. So making good habits means make it obvious so they're cued. Make it attractive, that craving comes. Make it easy, I just did it. And then make it satisfying, I'm happy I just did it. Now, breaking bad habits is the opposite of that. Hide it. Don't let that cue happen. If you're trying to quit smoking, put the pack of cigarettes away. Or in my case, if I don't want to eat that extra cookie, I go and put them in the cabinet so they're not in my sight. But if I do ultimately see those cookies, I want to make it unattractable. So somehow I want to have it be so it's not making that craving happen. With the cigarette example, they've tried to do that with putting packs of cancer patients, pictures of cancer patients on the pack, make it unattractable, make it hard. If I still want it, well, let's make it as difficult as possible. Again, keeping that smoking example, you can't smoke in buildings, you can't smoke in planes. They're making it harder and harder to smoke, try to help people break that habit. And then if it is still done, make it unsatisfying. So there's examples of this. The one that comes to mind immediately is I believe there's now medicine that can make someone who's an alcoholic become sick after engaging in drinking. So that would be the example of making it unsatisfying. So even if I follow through with the habit, make it a bad experience. So hopefully I don't get that same loop that I had before where I feel the reward is coming at the end of the behavior. So that's James Clear's habit loop. To put it into action, which we'll do in a second, first I'll say one other note on habits is that they are small single behaviors. A lot of people like to bundle, like the whole workout experience is a habit. And it's okay to use that as a mental model, but it actually isn't a specific habit. That's a collection of lots of habits, what is considered a habit stack. So my morning experience, I go to the gym every morning and I lay my clothing out on my dresser. So when I wake up, as soon as my feet touch the ground, boom, that's my cue. Craving comes. I want to get out of my sleep clothes. I want to get into my workout clothes. So that's my action. I do that. And then my satisfaction is now I'm in my gym clothes and I'm actually a little cold. So I'm like, okay, that cold now that I'm in just shorts and a t-shirt is my next cue. Craving, I got to get moving to warm up. So then I start moving and that's a response. And then the satisfaction is I'm warm. And then it just continues going all the way through the gym, back home, etc. So if you really want to build a routine is just a collection of a lot of single behaviors that are stacked against each other. The one last piece that's very important with habits is that they happen in the same environment. When I'm business traveling or I'm on vacation, that habit of going to the gym is in a brand new context. I generally don't lay my clothing out. The gym is in a different place. I'm in a different place. So it's a lot harder to keep that habit going. So habits happen in the same context. And if you want to break a habit, one of the best ways to begin to do it is by changing the environment. Now, again, putting this one in a little bit more of one specific example of this habit loop, we're going to use Peloton again. I think that, again, they do this really well. It's what's made them such a strong fitness brand. So Q is the app will trigger an individual with a notification. The craving is, I want to stick to my fitness goal. It's because that notification just reminded me not to break the streak. It reminded me that it's time to get on the leaderboard. It's time to work out. So I go and I work out. That's my action. And then my reward is an in-app reward, in-app progress. I may get some social gratification. I might feel good and I'm reminded that I'm feel good. That is the habit at play. It's going to want me to come back next time that I get that cue. Now, the last piece for this habit section, many of you, especially those that are familiar with the tech side of thinking about habits, will have heard of BJ Fogg. BJ Fogg has a large collection of resources of his B equals MAP model, or the Fogg behavioral model. B equals MAP stands for behavior equals motivation, ability, and prompt. So you can see that simple plot there says that if you have a high motivation, even if something hard, once you're prompted to do it, you'll probably do it. If you have low motivation, it has to be super easy to do. Otherwise, when you're prompted, you're not going to do it. And it has that action line, which is that it's not per se mathematical, but it is a good framework to look. Is this easy to do? Is there high motivation? If one isn't there, you got to make sure the other, because if neither are there, the best prompt in the world is not going to get someone to ultimately take an action. So this is another great model. It's, like I said, much more in the applied setting. I haven't seen as much on the academic side, so I'm going to leave it there, but there's a lot of great resources out there if you're interested in this model. And so the last one, social norms, which again, this is the most new field of being in the applied setting. I myself have only been able to apply it a few times. I am trying, there's just more interest in it as Nudge recognizes that everything we've talked about up to this point has been focused on the individual and the individual's choice environments. Social norms thinks about, well, how does everyone else around them also influence them? And for that, we're going to talk about Cialdini's influence model. And this has 6 universal truths of influence. These 6 are liking, reciprocity, social proof, scarcity, authority, and consistency. And there's a lot on this. This graphic even tells you more. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to choose a couple that I've seen in practice a good amount. The first is social proof. If you haven't heard of O-Power, take a note to go and look up O-Power. Still to this day, I think it is the best example of an amazing social proof that actually yields a pro-social behavior, savings on energy. And that's what you're seeing in that top right corner, which says that when you get your bill, it compares your actions to your neighbors and your most efficient neighbors. So even if you're doing good compared to all your neighbors, you're probably not doing as good as your efficient neighbors. And that's the power of the social proof, is you can do better because there are others out there who are doing better than you. Or you are doing good because you're doing better than the average person. There's also, this was a screenshot that I found of how people are rating these wines, that they're happy with the purchase. That's also social proof. The next one is authority. An authority is recognizing that having an authority figure, which there is some bias in that, because sometimes people can just look like an authority figure. They can act like an authority figure, even if they're not. But nonetheless, the principle is that when an authority figure does something, it's likely to influence others' behavior. And in this case, this is an Amazon search for weights. You can see that the editorial recommendations that are coming from a men's fitness or garage gym reviews, which is the authority of weights, they have their recommendations highlighted, which if I'm a novice user of weights, I'm going to go, oh, these people look like they know what they're doing. These are probably the weights that I should buy. Similarly, the Google local guide is another one. You'll see that if you do a Google search for a review, or I should say Google Maps search, and you're looking at reviews, some people will be listed as Google local guides. Those reviews generally will have more weight in one's mind compared to just average ones, because you're saying, oh, this person's a Seattle local reviewer, or oh, this person has reviewed a lot of health and fitness companies, etc. And the last example of the 6 truths of influence is scarcity. And we already talked about this in dark patterns, but just to reiterate it, you see scarcity, false scarcity specifically, presented a lot on hotel and other booking websites, where they make it seem like these hotels are not going to exist in 1 minute if you don't purchase right now. But in reality, generally it's still there the next day that you're looking at it, and the prices haven't changed that much. So scarcity is when people take action because it feels like it's not going to be there in the future. A bank run, for those of you recording this on March 14th, there was a scare over the weekend of a bank run. That's another scarcity, is if I don't take action now, my money may not be there in the future. And that's where social influence can be a very powerful tool and create a lot of panic in markets, especially in markets, but in a lot of different situations. So the last slide here is Christina Beccari's work. And again, I have not seen this applied in a tech setting. I have in nonprofit space. So I'm just going to touch on it briefly, but her work shows that there are 4 different types of norms, and being able to break those norms into component parts, such as the difference between a factual belief as just something I believe myself, a moral belief as I believe this to be true, I believe this to be right, it's ethical, so it's subjective, and then comparing those to descriptive and social norms, which is more about what I believe other people are doing, or what I believe other people then expect of me. This is just a really good framework to help better understand how to categorize social norms. So this has been the 4 components of applied behavioral science, or applied behavioral science 101. If we've made it this far, I hope you found this content engaging and exciting. Like I said, I write about a lot of this. I have an article about this topic, among many others. So go ahead and check out my LinkedIn at Connect Connor. You can also email me, connectconnor@gmail.com. But otherwise, I hope that you have a great day and a good competition. Thank you.